Hello everyone and welcome to this three-part episode series in the Decade podcast, a podcast where we curiously explore holistic sustainability and answers to the question of how on earth can we live together. And here we also try to weave the red thread between the inner transformation needed with the outer transformation. And my name is Jonathan, one of the hosts of this podcast, and I have with me
Melker.
Exactly.
And with these episodes, we want to kind of create facilitation as content, because when we have been going on our own personal development journeys, we've come across lots of content, lots of information, and that has been very helpful and still is. But we feel more and more that we're gaining benefit from actually doing practices and reflective work. And we think that many of you listeners will be at similar stages. So that's why we are doing this type of content today. And with us in this exploration, we have a previous podcast guest, none other than...
Exactly. So Carl Lindeborg, which we recorded with, I think it is episode 17. Actually, if you want to circle back and listen to that one as a context for this episode. But Carl has more than 20 plus years within leadership development. He has his own courses and work with upper management and leadership for big corporations, and has great wisdom and knowledge within this field. And he has now written a book called The Authentic Shift: Inner Development for a Changing World.
And it really resonates with this approach that we're having here, because this book is like a leadership development program in a book format. So it's not just something that you read through, but it's also very much inviting for practice and reflection. So the book has 3 main segments, and in them there are 9 different keys. And we will go through 3 of these keys in one of the different areas to get kind of a glimpse into this and to initiate some of these processes, which can be really helpful for your own personal journey.
So it's a great opportunity for you as a listeners to listen in and tune in to what we talk about with Carl, but then also get practical and do these exercises as we also include in these episodes.
So we recommend that you are in a setting where you can be a bit more undisturbed or reflective, and if you want to, you can even bring out the pen and paper for some of the exercises, but you don't need to. But we recommend it.
Yes.
With that said,
enjoy. Can you just talk briefly a little bit about this negativity bias that we have?
Right. I mean, just give you a little bit background, this sort of climate for growth, inner climate for growth. I think sometimes we forget about that. We dive into important sort of life questions with an inner climate that is not always friendly. I think a lot of us at some part of our lives have been quite hard on ourselves. Yes, and me too, you know. And a lot of people I meet in my courses and trainings, especially ambitious people, are sort of sometimes very tough.
Yeah,
we are sort of worst judges ourselves. And that's not really, you know, it's not pleasant, but it's not either sort of helpful for really growing on the inside. It actually keeps us stuck. And so that's why this key of creating an helpful, generative inner climate for growth is so important, I think, before we move on. And one of the aspects why we tend to see the negative sometimes in ourselves, you know, if you get feedback, if you get written feedback, or if you pass it, you know, you make a test, or your boss gives you some feedback, and 90% is positive, and there is this one thing that is, you know, a little bit of criticism. What do you remember? And I've asked a lot of people this question, and I'm the same, I think. I mean, we remember what sort of stood out as being negative or being interpreted as negative by the brain. And it's, of course, this is a survival mechanism. You know, our ancestors that survived were good at interpreting things as you know, potentially negative because they could foresee danger that way. This is not always very helpful in our lives because we don't live in that context. So our brains naturally has a negativity bias. Then we're different, and the environment makes us different. But creating a climate for growth means that you have to usually quite deliberately and proactively bring in more positive input and stimuli and search for that. At least 3 to 5 times more positive input than negative. So I've chosen a couple of examples of that in the book. One is, and I call it positive inversions, sort of turning something potentially limiting or negative into something positive or generating. And I know you talked a little bit about something that had spoken to you with radical acceptance.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to start, because one thing we end up with this sort of brain that can be drawn to the negative is that we start fighting reality. We start fighting what already is. We start sort of protesting. I don't want it to be this way, or I don't, I don't want that whatever happened in the meeting yesterday happened, and we get stuck on what already is. Rather than process it and move on to where the potential is, where the opportunities are.
And can it also be things that we don't have as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The moment our sort of system, our thoughts and our feelings and even our bodies start resisting what is, our reality, it takes a lot of energy from us. And that can be all kinds of things. We run a retreat here. We have a farm. There's always something that breaks and costs money. And if I get stuck on being upset about that and think about that a lot, I leak a lot of energy to that. It can be something a friend said. It can be feedback from our boss. It can be... And it doesn't mean that we have to like whatever happens to us.
No.
But the moment we start getting in a fight with reality, it's usually not a very creative place. And that's where this notion of moving from impossible resistance, where you can't really change what has already happened, into radical acceptance. And I use that term, radical acceptance, because it's radical because some part of us don't want to accept that it is the way it is. I didn't succeed in the race, or whatever happened to us. So it's radical to choose a new path. Okay, I'm going to accept that my partner is like this, but I'm going to work with it. It doesn't mean that I'm going to be passive, but I'm going to accept that things are the way they are right now and move on. And that's why it's radical. We go against this negativity bias that is built into our system and some of these inner voices that we may have.
Oh, beautiful. And because when I read that part and also tried the exercises around it, what I experienced was that it freed up so much more space and energy. That, as you said, something that I spent so much energy on fighting. What was that I was feeling it. I was spending some energy leaking on just fighting the reality. And I felt when I radically just accepted what was, I freed up space. And in space, I mean, like I could connect with certain things in my mind, thought patterns, creative solutions to the issue that I was facing. But can you expand a little bit on why you find it to be such a powerful tool?
Well, I also think that a lot of people actually spend some of their energy fighting reality without even knowing it. It's kind of a normal state. And some people will be more aware of it. But it takes a lot of time. And and energy and mental processing. And once you come to terms with what already is, once you forgive yourself for making a mistake or forgiving somebody else, or just decide to move on, it's not what I had hoped, but let's move on. There is a relief, and I think you describe that on the inside. And the body relaxes, the mind flows better, we get more creative, and suddenly our whole mental emotional state can shift, and there is another kind of inner flow, and we get more in touch with potential. And it's so important here to stress that radical acceptance doesn't mean that we like whatever thing we're stuck with. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't be acting. It just means that we shouldn't sabotage for ourselves. Because I think that's what happens when we get stuck in impossible resistance to what already is.
Yeah. And you also bring up gratitude as a very important practice. And you talked about the ratio earlier with 3-1 to kind of deal with the negativity bias. Can you talk a little bit more about, because this is something that I find fascinating and something that I battle a little bit with at the moment to design the gratitude practices into my life so it become like a habitual thing. So it's part of me. So I find it that I can get into certain practices, like writing things I'm grateful for in the morning or in the evening, but I haven't seemed to get it to as a part of my routine.
Right.
So how should we practice gratitude, and what is it that will be demanded, or what does it take for it to become more habitual and getting closer to this 3-1 ratio?
Yeah, and the 3-1 ratio comes from, there are a lot of research on this in the field of positive psychology. There is one researcher that I quote in the book called Barbara Fredrickson, who'd seen that a lot of people may have, 1-1, 2-1 in terms of positive versus negative thoughts and feelings. But there is kind of a shift when we go over 3-1. We feel better, we get more creative, more resilient. The challenge here is that, once again, the brain always like new things, right? It's not so interested in what, okay, I'm healthy today. I mean, the body's not like, oh, great, I'm healthy today, but it sort of notices when it's sick because it stands out. So I think one of the things is to try to kind of, as you're saying, habitually go against that tendency in the brain to take things for granted. I mean, almost in any circumstance, there's always something to be grateful for. And I think it's a kind of a disease in the world where so many people are just disconnected from deeper gratitude and gratefulness, and you just strive for the next thing and then the next thing, and there is kind of an egoistic force behind that, and you're never really satisfied. And I think it's about coming back to where you are right now and seeing the gifts that you have, because that will immediately shift your inner state. And in the beginning, if you're not used to that, if you know that your brain is always looking for what's not working, or always want to strive on to the next thing, not really celebrating whatever you have already achieved. Well, it's a good thing to make a practice out of it. And in the beginning, as you're saying, I think it's good to tie it to something you do every day. For a while, I had a little book by my bed where I ended the day just noting down 3 things I was grateful for. You can do it in the morning, standing in the shower, 3 things that I'm grateful for. But as you move along, it's also interesting to see what happens if I can remember to look at this even during my day. Leaving a meeting, what was one thing that I was grateful for in this meeting? Or, sitting on the bus, what is one thing I'm grateful for? So to make it more into, this is the way I
function.
I'm functioning. This is the way I am. This is the way my system works. It naturally brings in these gifts into my awareness. And I think in the beginning, in a practice like this, you tie it to certain things. I'm grateful for this relationship. I'm grateful that we do the podcast today. I'm grateful that somebody's listening. Or I'm grateful for my health, or I'm grateful for my children. But as I have at least experienced in myself over time, is that you kind of develop this more greater gratefulness that is just connected to being alive. Doesn't need to be anything special. It's just like, wow, I'm alive in this amazing world. And if somebody would look at this world from the moon and just see it looks amazing. I mean, it's beautiful. And there are so many wonderful people. Of course, there are other people too, but I think it's possible to just resonate gratefulness, which is, a beautiful feeling to have, but you also become a person that people really enjoy being close to. You radiate a positive vibration, so to speak.
So what I hear is you saying that it's almost, in the beginning it takes some intentional work, but then it's almost compounding.
Yeah.
So the more you practice, the more autonomous it gets, and
it sort of get programmed into your subconscious, so it will happen by itself with enough practice.
Yes. Okay, that's good. Perfect.
Well, as with everything,
Yeah.
But
I'll take a mental note of that and take that with me.
I think the key is to keep going for a while. If you're sort of new to this kind of practice, to what happens if I do it every day for 3 months, morning and evening? Something will shift.
I really resonate with that. One thing I tried when I was in Sri Lanka was to do breath work every day, and now it just happens by itself.
It's like brushing the teeth.
Yeah. I haven't done it like every day, but maybe 90% of the days since I've been going to Sri Lanka and are back here. So it just happens.
Yeah.
It's very, very powerful.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Power of habit.
And I want to shift to creating this climate for growth, which is inner coaching, and this constant dialogue that happens within us and this I have a lot of experience with, and of course going through, and I think it's natural for people that want to grow, because this inner critic or this inner voice, which is wired from a lot of different things around in our cultural norms, or could be parents wanting something for us that are giving criticism to what we want to achieve, and with the negativity bias in mind as well, it can be very loud, that voice. Feel free to expand a little bit on this inner coach as we're in the inner dialogue, but what is it that we can do when we find this inner critical voice being so loud? What can we practically do?
So the first thing is that the moment, when we're younger in our development, we don't even notice the voices we have on the inside. Usually, they just are. This is the way this inner universe is. At some point, we start developing this ability to notice, what are my thoughts? What are the voices on the inside? And for many of us, especially people that I think that are quite ambitious and driven, that there could be an inner critic that is not always very nice to hear, or very friendly, or very supportive. And you hear that you're actually giving yourself messages that you wouldn't give to anybody else, at least not to your friends.
No.
And I've had so many course participants that have had this dynamic, and I've had it too earlier in my life. And we kind of suddenly really realized that we are our toughest judges ourselves. And this voice is then what I call the inner critic. And as you say, it's there for a reason. It has, in one way, some positive intention. I mean, it wants to protect us from something, or it doesn't want us to fail, or it wants us to do our best, but it's communicating in a way that's not helpful, and it's not seeing the totality of our situation or of our potential. And it comes from a very sort of early logic, so to speak. So we have to create distance if we recognize this voice in ourselves, to create distance to it, but not really fight it, because it's still part of ourselves. But how can we create space and promote other voices that are more helpful, that are more generative, that are more in touch with potential, that are sort of more realistic in the now, that are not just driven by old programming, which this critic usually is. So that's another important part, another important resource in this section about creating a helpful climate for growth. How do I deal with a potential inner critic, and how do I promote other voices? And I bring up two other voices here, which is the inner supporter and the inner coach. And how do I create a sort of interesting and dynamic and helpful interplay between these voices?
Interesting. And what is the distinction then between the inner supporter and the inner coach? Is the supporter more kind of kind and just like holding, and the coach is more like, okay, dare to do this, so take this step forward, I got your back? Or how does it?
Great question. Yeah, I think there are two different tonalities to these voices. The inner supporter to me is kind of, it's a nice voice, but it's also kind of simplistic. It's like, oh, you're doing great, you're gonna succeed, or this was wonderful. And we need those kind of messages sometimes to in Swedish we say peppa, to sort of, get into, to boost ourselves. But it's not really a very sophisticated voice. And sometimes we need this kind of voice, which is more curious, more open, and more nuanced, that can tolerate both that there is a critic and there is a supporter. Okay, what do I do with this now? And that's the coach. Of course, we may go to an external coach that will listen to us and to our problems and challenges and opportunities. Will probably ask us questions. And listen and be curious and help us find something new within ourselves. And the inner coach works the exact same way. So we're actually going to the coach, but it's inside. So it works more with openness, curiosity, listening, and definitely asking a lot of open questions that can get us to move into something new, which the supporter doesn't really do. It's more sort of boosting and what already is. And sometimes we need that. But I think the coach within ourselves can take a more holistic perspective.
I see. So you would say step one is to get aware of what is going on within us, what voices are there, and how to connect with the different ones.
Yes, and getting aware of our critic can be very tough. So I just want to say this, if somebody's listening that has a very tough critic, to also remember that you're more than that voice. You have the capacity to listen to the voice, which means that you're more than the voice. So what is this more? And more seeing the voice as a pretty simplistic programming that we have inside of us. We need to allow space for it, but it shouldn't be allowed to take all the space. I know we're going to come to self-compassion, but that's related to this. We need also self-compassion to be able to deal with our critic in a good way.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for bringing that up, because I think that's so important to emphasize that that's what I've found in my journey with being almost as a detective of my own kind of inner landscape, is that you find a lot of stuff and a lot of stuff is quite uncomfortable to deal with or dissect, and like, okay, so what does this make of me when I have these thoughts and feelings and patterns? So it's easy to become very critical of oneself. So thank you for bringing that perspective to the surface. And I think that's a beautiful segue into self-compassion, which you also bring up as a very important part of this key of creating this inner climate for growth. Why is it that it's so important for us to be kind towards ourselves in the process?
Yeah, I think, we learn early in life that we should be kind to other people, but maybe we haven't learned that it's equally or even more important to be kind to ourselves. I really think that whatever manifests in the external world is a mirroring of what's going on in the internal world. So obviously, if our world leaders and the most influential people in the world are very kind to themselves, I think we would have a very different world.
Yes.
So it starts there, and I like the term self-compassion, there is an interesting researcher called Christine Neff who has done a lot of research on the power of self-compassion, to direct compassion towards yourself. And she basically says, once again, that it starts with awareness. You need to start by noticing what are you actually telling yourself and listen into that. Then the second part is, of course, to just clarify for yourself that no one is perfect. No one in this world is perfect. Not even the most successful people that you look up to. They also have their bad days, and they also have failed, and they have also had very tough times. So it's common humanity that we face setbacks, that things are not always going the way we want them to. And it's nice. It's common humanity. How are we to be perfect? It would be very strange if Carl Lindeborg, was the only one super perfect. Like, it's so natural. It's just human that we, it's ups and downs, and we learn from it and we move on. So it's common humanity. And the third thing is to direct kindness to yourself. And I think the best way that I've learned is to the messages that you direct to yourself could be the same ones you would tell to a friend in the same situation. So if you have a friend facing the same challenge that you are, what would you say? And then direct it to yourself. And this can be really hard, I think, if you have a history of a very hostile internal climate. But start small. And it will be ups and downs, and you will forget, and you will be critic again, but come back to it. And whenever you're in a tough situation, direct kindness to yourself. It's okay. You're doing your best. Be patient with yourself. Give yourself some time. You don't need to figure it out today. And listen to yourself as you would do to a friend in a difficult situation. And also give space to process, to be sad, to forgive, to be human. I think all of those are parts in cultivating self-compassion.
Yeah, I actually wrote down a quote from Christine Neff that I think you have it in the book as well, where she says that being human is not about being any one particular way. It's about being as life creates you, with your own particular strengths and weaknesses, gifts and challenges, quirks and oddities.
Yeah.
And I think it sums up beautifully what you just said. It's like accepting who you are with everything that you are, and with self-love, with compassion.
And I think it's so important to do this because, especially in this time we live, we're exposed to what I call the fictive perfect. You know, if you look at people, whatever people post on social media about their lives, a lot of it is, you know, when they are in a nice situation or, you know, doing something great or, and if you just see these things where people post from their peaks, and your brain loves to generalize, you may think, well, I'm worthless.
Yeah.
I'm not doing this, and I didn't go there on vacation, and I didn't succeed like that, and I didn't run this race, and I did, you know. And your brain is comparing to something that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Because no one could hold all of this without having a, you know, a dark side or a struggling side. So that's why I think this practice for us to be sane in this world is super important.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And you bring up this in the book as well, and I find it very interesting that you talk about that self-compassion actually creates the condition for faster development and also a stronger and healthier performance.
Yeah.
Please elaborate on that, because that sounds really nice.
Well, this is really interesting, right? Because a lot of the course participants I have are kind of leaders, they're ambitious people. And then I say, no, you're going to be kind to ourselves. And people are like, but then I get lazy.
Yeah.
I don't want to be lazy. And then I bring up this research that shows that people, when you have two groups or three groups, one group is not doing any preparation, one group is boosting themselves, and one group is reflecting on self-compassion. Then they all get to do a test where everybody's going to fail, but they don't know it from the start. The group that afterwards show the clearest signs of sort of wanting to learn from what they experienced, wanting to try again, are the ones that practice self-compassion before having this sort of setback. They are much more likely to do that than people that didn't prepare or that were just sort of boosting themselves with a supporter voice. And I usually bring this up, and then people are, maybe I should be a little bit kinder to myself. It's not going to interfere with my ambition or my career. Or I think the thing is to be kind and move, you know, not just be kind, but kind, learn, act, move, and accept when things don't go as planned, and up again. And that's when you get into this very generative, creative place where you can move faster towards your potential, and I believe make a bigger difference in the world.
So what I hear you saying is like, it's not about just being compassionate, just kind, like, oh no, you're doing fine, you don't need to do anything, just like, it's still gonna require you doing the work, but being kind towards yourself in that process.
Yes.
So that will create more, as you say, a regenerative kind of relationship with your growth and development.
You can have a very bold vision and very high targets and still be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
There's
really
no
like
contradiction
that.
at all.
I like that. Nice. And maybe just to round off this section. So why is it? Because what the norm is often about is to kind of this like no pain, no gain. You have to work really hard and like push to get somewhere.
Yeah.
So why is it actually counterproductive to be this way?
Well, the moment you kind of start you know, really clenching your fist and I'm gonna move, you kind of contract your system, right? There's no creative flow in the system, or there's less. So that's why this whole inner climate there should be space, there should be allowance. But still, I like to have a high, you know, bold vision, and I'd like to strive towards making a difference in the world. That's what my vision is all about. Writing a book with 414 pages is, of course, not just happening by me sitting by myself, being kind to myself, but the kindness definitely helps that process. You know, when I just take that as an example, writing a book, you know, you write something, you're like, oh, this is never going to work, and this is not good enough, or people are not going to like this. And I could definitely end up criticized. Oh, I'm such a bad author, or what am I doing, or idiot, you know. But it's very different where I'm like, okay, you did your best. Maybe you cannot use all of this, and being a bit kind, and then say, well, it's normal. It's common humanity. I mean, probably all authors are going through this, and then you move on.
Yeah.
Such a different energy in that.
Yeah.
And so yes, I think it's really helpful, and I think you also radiate a different kind of energy. If you look into the world, what we need right now, I think in general is more empathy and more compassion. And it's very hard to mobilize that if that doesn't exist on the inside. It needs to start on the inside. Otherwise, it's never gonna be broad enough. You can feel empathy and compassion with your family, your friends, but we need in the world a much broader empathy right now. We need to be able to feel with people suffering and people being treated in very bad ways. Not losing ourselves into that, but we need to tune into that in order to be able to make good decisions for the whole. And I think it somehow starts on the inside of yourself.
Yeah.
That capacity.
Very nice, very beautiful. We are gonna soon get into some practical exercises, but I just wanted to summarize a little bit, because I think what we've been talking about now, I think really resonates with the people listening to this podcast. So a lot of people that want to make a difference, want to make work for a better world, have big visions, how we can and how we should create a more nice world to live in. And along that journey, I resonate a lot with what we've talked about here, what's going on inside. So I think it's some really nice things that you've touched upon here that I think a lot of listeners can take with them in their everyday work and what they're doing. So to focus on creating this relationship with the positive and the negative, to cope with the negatively biased, and to be aware of our own thoughts, what is going on inside us, and to actually look at ourselves with compassion, that you're doing so many good things and great things for the world. And I find I used to say that everyone that is somewhat dedicating their careers or studies, or if it is initiatives besides their work that they engage in creating a better world, they are today's heroes. So with that journey, it can be very tough.
Oh yeah.
Very, very tough. And to have tools like this to cope with what is going on within us, I think will be a fundamental key for us to be able to create this better world. So, and that is why we also love to take this more holistic approach to sustainability. So to talk about what is going on inside of us.
Yeah.
How can we learn about it? How can we develop ourselves, and how can we equip ourselves to in a better way, deal with the outer change that we're trying to achieve. So thank you so much for this first part of our 3-part series and highlighting this very important aspect of creating a climate for growth.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure so far, and I'm looking forward to now guide, hopefully, the listener into doing some work.
Yes. Shall we delve into it?
Yes, let's do it.
Nice.
All right. So just maybe sharing with the listener here what we're gonna do, and we're basically gonna do what I do in the programs that I run for people that want to grow and lead into the future, and very often I guide an exercise where I ask questions that the participant reflect on, connected to what we've been talking about. But before this, I also guide some kind of focusing exercise, getting into a helpful state for reflection. So I thought we were going to do that. I'm just going to lead a short focusing exercise
Nice.
And then basically ask some questions. And for the listener, I will allow about a minute of silence after each question to just sit with the question, see what comes up. If you have paper and pen around, you can take some notes based on your inner replies. And if you don't, you can just sit with the question and see, be curious what arises from the inside. Perfect. And we're going to focus here on getting to know more about this inner landscape with voices. And we're going to explore and reflect a little bit about our potential critic, supporter, and coach.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Nice.
Are we ready to go?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. I think I will look at you because I'm like, shall I look at them at the viewers or you? But I will probably look at you. Okay. So and you can practice, Jonathan, if you like. Yeah, I think that would be the best. So just and this is now for everybody listening. So just if you're in a spot where you can just make sure you sit in a stable way, maybe stretch your back, close your eyes if it's possible. If you're driving a car, don't close your eyes. Just take a few deep breaths. You can breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth, and relax on the out breath. See if you can get a sense of getting more present wherever you sit. Getting more in tune with yourself at this moment. Sensing your body, sensing your breathing. And we have just talked about self-compassion, and maybe a nice thing can be just to not just be in your brain, but also sense your heart. Okay, good. Now I'm just going to ask a few questions. And as I said before, just sit with a question, see if you can learn anything. Just be curious on what could arise. And the questions refer to this inner dynamic of various voices that are somewhere on the inside, in most of us. So here comes the first question. If you, to the best of your ability, calmly and neutrally face the critic in you and say, "Welcome, I'm here, I'm listening," what can you learn? Just make sure you keep some distance, you observe this voice, you don't become it. You have the voice, you are not it. And what do you think the critic inside is trying to help you with? Even if the expression may be too judgmental or harsh, what could be somewhere behind a positive intention of the inner critic. And if you find that your inner critic is sort of too critical, how could this inner voice, this inner critic, communicate more constructively, more relevantly, and less judgmentally within you? And just check in with you. Are you willing to coach, affirm, and lead this inner critic on a path of change and upgrade, rather than to fight it? Now let's shift focus to the inner supporter. The voice that unconditionally like to boost yourself. So if this inner voice was given 1 minute of free time to highlight the positive things about you, what would it say? And if this feels difficult, think about what a good friend would say. What would they appreciate with you? And also reflect on when it could be particularly important for you to get help and support from this inner supporting voice in your everyday life. When do you want to open up to these kinds of messages? And lastly, let's explore what we call the inner coach. If you were to design your own optimal inner coach, what would it be like? What qualities would it have? How would it be acting inside of you? And in what situations in your everyday life, you can just take like a normal day, work, or if you're studying, in what situations would you be most helped by accessing the inner coach? maybe you can even see yourself, in the future, maybe later today or tomorrow or later in the week, some point remembering to access your inner coach in a certain situation. A quality inside of you that is sort of listening, that is curious, that asks you open questions. That may help you react differently or take a new path in that situation. Okay, so that was the last question that I wanted to ask at this point. So wherever you are in the process, you can just sense that you are now starting to come back. And just bringing whatever insights that came from these questions with you. Welcome back.
Thank you.
How was it?
Very nice. So I've done these questions some time back, and it was nice to sit with them again. And what came up for me was that I'm so much in power.
Yes.
To who I choose to listen to, and in what situation I choose to listen to what voice. And I actually felt compassion with the inner critic.
Yes, that's a wonderful thing.
So that I know that you have the best of intentions. I know that you just want to keep me safe and keep me away from out of harm's way, and not get into situations or for me to feel things that have been painful in the past, etc., etc. But what you said earlier resonated a lot, that it communicates in a very immature way, or a very harsh way, or a very direct way, or so I felt that I could, like you said, when you like really welcome the critic in, I found it easier to listen to what the actual message was, without being affected by the harsh, critical voice or tone. So my experience is to have more distance towards the voice, and that enabled me to then also easier listen to the supporter and the coach, which was very nice.
Yeah, because that's connected, right? If you don't manage to create a little bit space around your critic, it's very hard to go into supporter state or listen to the supporter voice. So yeah, well, that's cool to hear. Thank you.
Nice. Thank you very much for bringing this exercise, and I hope you as a listener also had a great time with this setup, learning about and hearing us talk about these different dimensions of creating this very nice climate for growth. I don't want to shoehorn the term sustainable here, but for me it creates a very nice climate to continue working on creating a positive impact on this world long term.
Yeah.
So with this type of work, we're actually building the foundation to give ourselves the chance and enable us to continue working for a better world, because that's what we see in this impact sector, that so many people suffer from burnout and being too harsh on themselves, going full force and then needing to quit or change careers or being on sick leave. So I think this work is so important, and also communicating that you are enough.
Yeah.
And you are doing enough by just showing up as who you are. So again, thank you so much for writing this book, and thank you for being part of this first 3-part series.
Thank you. Looking forward to take it onwards.
Yes.
In the next section. Thanks.
Thank you.